Okay, I think the internet wants to participate. Sorry for starting a few minutes late, you guys. Just a little bit of a technical hurdle behind the scenes, but I'm not going to spend any more time problem solving that because we are off and running.
I think you're
So,
being very kind. The technical hurdle was your guest was running late because the technical hurdle in this case was the 22. And I wish as somebody running for office, I had a solution for that.
It's all good. I think everybody can appreciate a little bit of traffic. So no big deal. So guys, thanks for joining in another Town Hall Tuesday. Tonight I have the opportunity to talk to Stephanie Wade, who is running for District 3, which I have to be honest with you, I was doing a little bit of homework before our call, and in having lived here for a long time, I just thought I know exactly where that is. I just know exactly where that map is. And somebody who is on tonight set me straight. So they know who they are. I won't name names, but my name is Nat Ferguson. I'm a broker here in Seal Beach, live in Old Town District 1, but I am excited to talk to a little bit about what's happening with District 3, some big plans that Stephanie has laid out as part of her campaign. And Stephanie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. So can you, for the folks that don't know you or people who are trying to get to know you a little bit better, can you share a little bit about your professional background, maybe also how long you lived in Seal Beach and what brought you here?
So to start with, sort of where I come from is that I've been a government dork all my life. I didn't initially see myself going into politics. That's something very recent, and not less politics, but public office. But in my case, I started out at age 17. I went into the Marine Corps. I graduated a year early from high school because I was so eager, and celebrated my 18th birthday in Okinawa, Japan. And I wound up getting out of the Marine Corps to go to college. And after the Marine Corps, or after college, I decided I wanted to go back into the Marine Corps to be an officer. I'd spent some time as an enlisted demolitions instructor at the basic school, teaching young lieutenants the basics of demolition. And I saw, it seemed a little better on the other side in terms of like, they got to do more, and the training they got. And I said, I want to be a part of that. And in my case, I was going to a school back east, Brown University. Foolishly didn't get, had to pay for it with loans that are now paid off, thank goodness. But I was thinking about becoming an investment banker because I was at Brown University, and that's what everybody did. Mm-hmm. And it was like an identity crisis for me. I had a job at an investment bank. I was working there over the summer and even part-time during the school year, doing due diligence on companies and things. And I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And who I was about, service and the military. And I just gave it all up. My senior year, I decided I wanted to go back into the Marine Corps. And I would have made that a career. They're some of the happiest years of my life, but really tough on families. And my wife at the time was complaining that I was gone literally 9 months out of a year. And that was peacetime, mind you. My son was 5 months old the first time I ever laid eyes on him. And so, we made a decision to get out for the family. And I was going to go study military history at Duke. And what we learned is that while my wife hated it when I was gone 9 months out of a year, she really hated it when I was home 12 months out of a year. So I spent 6 years at Duke studying, military and colonial American history. And then I wound up moving back to New York to help raise my son because that's, we split and that's what I needed to do. And so at that point, the logical decision for me was to become a school teacher. And so I taught 7 years of social studies, mostly at New Rochelle High School. Great, sort of truly diverse school in the sense that, it had very wealthy kids from the north, what we call the North End, where it borders Scarsdale. And it had a lot of kids who were learning English as a second language, and they all mixed together. And I think they benefited from each other. It was a great place to teach. But ultimately, I decided, I got remarried. My wife said, no more grading papers for you, because I used to pull an all-nighter almost every night, one all-nighter a week for about 7 years. So I went into teaching phys ed, which I really loved, and gave me more time for coaching. And I coached rugby and track and field. And I even coached basketball once. I was kind of a fraud. And so that was my career. And eventually I took a job. I was teaching for 5 years in Inglewood, which was some of the most rewarding teaching I've ever done, but it was very hard because the district is bankrupt.
Mhm.
And then in 2016, I just decided to make a change, and I started working ultimately for Gil Cisneros. He was a veteran. He was, running here in Orange County, and I learned a little bit about his bio and how much he'd given to kids for their education, and so that's what led me eventually to my current day job. I work for Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley. I worked for Cisneros for 2.5 years between the campaign and the 2 years that he served as congressman. He's
Mhm.
now Under Secretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. And so my next job was working for Katrina Foley, who used to represent us here in Seal Beach. But basically, when I left Cisneros' employ and had an opportunity to jump ship, this was the first place I came. And I came because I'm a surfer, but I also love small towns. I lived for many years in Swansboro, North Carolina, just 3 blocks. I owned a home 3 blocks from the Intracoastal Waterway. And like, if you know Swansboro, which nobody does, it's like that big. And that's what I wanted. And that's why I'm here. And I finally arrived.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I love your description that it's about this big, which is exactly how I describe Seal Beach. So I think that's the parallel between those two. You like small towns? This was a small town for sure. Well, you've got a lot of great talking points, and you have a lot of really important interests as part of looking at running for the council in District 3. And going back to what I was saying when we started tonight was understanding, I think, the uniqueness of not just District 3, but the little caveats and cutouts of your district, right? I mean, if somebody said, where's District 3? And it's very easy to say, oh, it's the Hill, or it's just across the
It's
highway.
not. It's the Hill. It's the East. It's Seal Beach Shores. It's River Beach. It's Heron Point. It's Bridgeport. It's this little sliver of what most people would call Old Town that would include the, where the Meritage and Glory Days, that, and the McDonald's, but also the houses on the on Marina, several houses on Marina, including on the beach side.
Right where I'm sitting.
Business, which
Right where I'm sitting.
By the way, your business flooded in 2018,
2017, 2018. It's flooded a bunch of, and that was just from, when I moved into this location in 2015, and I had no idea how prone to flooding this corner is right here, which is actually a segue for my very first question for you tonight, because of those little carve outs of how your district is overlaid with these parts of, if you want to call it Old Town, you've got some very unique things happening in the district. So what are your plans to address flooding in the low-lying areas of District 3?
Well, one of the first things I want to do, and I was happy that when we had some flooding incidents occur, just in September when we had the tropical storm move by, it was good that the pumps seemed to be operational and we didn't have flooding in any of the homes. But we did have flooding, for instance, that we brought some of the mobile pumps down to, and then, Public Works built a temporary berm down at River's End. So, that's one thing. We just have to make sure our pump game is up to par, because it hasn't always been. And I've talked to a lot of folks who, they were flooded they've had flooding in Bridgeport, and, really bad flooding in 2014 in Seal Beach Shores. And so, that's part of it. But I would say the other thing is we need to look to gain outside revenue. And the Inflation Reduction Act has $269 billion with a B dollars devoted to coastal protection and restoration projects. We need to make sure that we're at the head of the line for that money. And there are things we can be doing, because I'm sorry, but I watched the bulldozers. That was too little too late. Bulldozers are not the answer to serious flooding that now occurs all year long. I mean, that wasn't a winter storm, that was a summer
No.
storm.
Yeah.
And we're going to get more of them. They're going to be, they're going to be increased frequency and increased power. And we're looking at sea level rise as well. And, that's within the next 50 years, we're looking at a minimum of 10 inches of increased sea level rise. And we already have flooding on the bike path on a regular high tide, not even a king tide. So I would like to see us do some of the progressive things like a living shoreline, which involves, restoring dunes and putting in new native plants like beach grasses to make sure that we're more resilient. And, one of the benefits of that is, living shorelines are beautiful, but they're also more resilient and really better equipped to protect our homes, our properties, and our business. That's the most important thing for, like you said, for all of Seal Beach. And then there are a lot of low-lying areas, particularly in District 3 and in Old Town.
Yeah, I like the living shoreline thing. I hadn't really thought about that until it's funny. Something about like the way that you think about living on the West Coast, but if you've been to the East Coast, we vacationed several years in Myrtle Beach, and you see like in the at least that was my experience. They've got the living shoreline. So when you see the erosion that comes in from those big hurricanes and storms that they have, it is way more resilient. I mean, that sand is like fixed in place, even when they get the strong flooding and winds and storm surge. It just, and then kind of empties back out. That is something we don't have down here for sure. That I think is a very interesting concept. I think that I'd love to see what that would look like and how that would work. But
drive down to Cape Point or San Clemente where they're already doing it.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, right down the road.
But let's make sure we can pay for it, and there's money out there. Let's make sure we get it. And I will say, I have some direct experience in this. I was an activist with the Surfrider Foundation. In fact, I still am. I'm a member of our local chapter, core volunteer with the local chapter, and I do things like beach cleanups, and I've worked tangentially on Hold On to Your Butts campaign, which is a cigarette butts campaign, here in Seal Beach, no less. And but I was a chair of one of the largest chapters in the country, and we did beach replenishment projects and beach grass projects, and put in more fencing to hold on to the existing plants. And I've seen that stuff work. I just really want to get the smartest people here and paid for to make sure we do the best that we can to make ourselves more resilient. And I think there are going to be both sanitary sewer and storm drain projects that we really need to invest in. I mean, we know we have a number of problems already, and some of them are being addressed, like the problem of the smell that we're getting up around Westminster and Seal Beach. And then the city is starting to move pretty expeditiously on some of those projects, but there are bigger projects I think we're going to need to take on to deal with a greater capacity of water. And it isn't just water either. I mean, the remediation in getting into Gum Grove Park, that's a real threat to all those folks that live on the hill and really the entire city, just because, it's mostly gum grove trees, and there's a lot of deadfall right now. I've been through there recently. And when I talked to Chief Roberts before he retired from OCFA, who was responsible for it, I said, hey, have you been in, when was the last time you were in there doing remediation? He's like, oh, we go pretty regularly. He said, I think about 3 years ago. I mean, I think we need to make sure that there's remediation done there and fire prevention done every single year, at least once a year. God forbid.
Oh yeah. I mean, you get back in there, you can realize you could throw a match on that place and then just go up.
Yeah, and I would say there's an issue there too with particularly the e-bikes. They've been implicated in a number of fires just because they have the lithium ion batteries.
Yep.
And they're not really supposed to be in there on e-bikes, and yet we see a lot of that. I think we need some education, outreach, and enforcement that starts with education to get people to think, I'm being told not to ride my e-bike here for my safety, but also the safety of the entire community, because we saw what happened in Laguna Niguel, 20 homes lost like that.
Yep. That's a whole new ball of wax, those things. Right. If I can, just before we move on to our next question, I just want to talk a moment about, you mentioned with regards to just how the water is shed here when we have heavy rainfalls. And I mean, just, this last week was like a freak. I mean, like Tuesday, Wednesday, those freak heavy downpours.
And hail.
Yeah, and hail. Yeah, I mean, it's just bizarre for October weather. One of the things I've seen and I've talked to the city about over the course of the last 7 years that I've been in this location is this interesting little nuance. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm curious to hear, what your thoughts are on it. So Marina Drive, from where it starts right here at Pacific Coast Highway, all the way down to First Street, if you're traveling westbound, which would be going towards First Street on Marina Drive, the right side of that street, all of those drains are mechanically pumped by the West End pumping station. I'm sure you knew that.
That's
part
right.
About,
yeah.
The part about it that I find fascinating is that the left-hand side of the road, if you're going the same direction down Marina Drive, all of that is gravity drained storm drainage. And the reason we have flooding over here is because this side of Marina Drive, where my office is located, there's Devon's Garden right here. Most people are familiar. This side of the street catches all the runoff from Ocean Avenue, down Main Street, down 8th Street, and down 7th Street. It all drains. The very first drain that water reaches is it goes right around the front of the building, down PCH. It turns right here on Marina Drive, and literally outside of this little boutique business is the very first drain. The other one is on the other side of the street where the Pacific Inn Hotel is. And anybody who's seen it get really heavy here notices they put a pump right outside of our office door. And what do? They run a hose across Marina Drive to the other side, and they pump it into that
into the gravity fed.
To the pump fed side.
Fed.
Because every time, not every time, but many times, what happens here is that we get a high tide and it rains really hard. Well, this side of the street can't drain. And I've asked, I don't know which planning director it was, many of the ones I've ran into over the years, why have you guys not tied in this side to that side? I don't really know. So, the solution has been to put a Band-Aid on it. Like you said, regarding the bulldozers, like that's actually being reactive. Like there's just no way we're going to be able to approach and address what's coming next if we're just reacting. It's like, look, you guys could literally put a pipe from one side of this side of Marina Drive to that side. It would tie in this entire thing to the pumping station on the West End. Think about, I mean, that's just, I mean, I don't know what it is about this street, but it kind of like, it has a heavier slope to the left
camber
side. Yeah. Or camber. I don't understand. So I'd love to see somebody talk about that. That isn't me.
And I would like to actually go out and look at it with you. Like for instance, I know that the intersection at 5th and Marina is a freaking death trap. And I went out and I know, two of my neighbors, one of whom I'm very close to, actually both of them, Sharon and then Sally Hirsch. I mean, they've been nearly killed in that intersection. And they've asked the city that, for the past 4 years to do something about it. And they haven't, but I think it's effective when people actually go out there and look at it. And if there needs to be a traffic study, we'll do a traffic study. If that doesn't work, I would use discretionary funds to make it get fixed. But I think the same thing, we should make a plan to go out and take a look at where the flooding is. And you can show us the picture of you and your hip waders walking through your business. I mean, we're smiling and joking about it, but it's no joke.
It is no joke. It is no joke. I mean, and I want to give just since we're on the topic, a shout out to the guys down at Public Works. He's no longer with the city of Seal Beach anymore, but he literally, he gave me, I don't remember, I can't remember his name. I'll have to find it in my phone.
It's Joe, isn't it?
No.
I'm mistaken.
Corey. His name was Corey.
Okay.
His name was Corey. Anyways, Corey said, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a little, there's like right here on the store brand, there's like, it looks like a little, almost like a reflector you'd see out in the street, and it has some kind of a built-in sensor, and it would text his phone when the water was rising. So they knew to make sure that the pump had a man at it, not to bring a pump. So the guys at Public Works, like they were sensitive to it. He actually gave me his cell phone number. He goes, hey man, text me anytime. I don't want you thinking you have to call the police or call 911, because literally we will be out here in the waiters, no joke, pulling cones from wherever we can find those orange cones, because it becomes a traffic hazard and it becomes a flooding hazard. You know, the Pacific Inn Hotel over here runs a more substantial business than I do. And they literally have people, they got water going into their lobby, and it's like, are we in Seal Beach? You know, imagine that's your first impression. So I don't want to spend any more time on that, but just to have a talking point about it, because I think it's something that should be able to be mitigated without, we're not trying to recreate the wheel here. It's just fixing some small problems.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, the city says, all right, well, we know certain spots are going to flood and they know where those spots are. And then we bring out the pumps. But then sometimes people are arguing over where they deployed the pumps. Let's not deploy the pumps. Let's actually come up with solutions, you know.
Agreed.
And your point about, you know, sort of passive collectors and ways to notify people, you know, notify Public Works, et cetera. I feel the same way about the noise from all the motorcycles that are, you know, riding around with headers or no exhaust whatsoever. And some of the cars, same thing. You know, I feel for the police. They have a sign up that says, you know, that they're going to ticket for this, but I want to ask how often they're ticketing. And I think the problem is it's pretty hard to catch people. But I know in some cities they use, you know, they can essentially have noise monitoring that would alert. And so if somebody's running by at the top of PCH by Long Beach and we have an alarm there, it's going to be a lot easier for you know, our PD, I think, to do enforcement, catching them before they leave Seal Beach and really enforcing it. And then all those people who go down to Mother's and party with their loud bikes are going to start getting the message that you better not blow through there making that much noise, because it's a huge quality of life issue.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, I feel like, you know, and that's also a good segue to our next topic here. But I do feel like, you know, it's not a matter of not wanting people to enjoy their motorcycles. It really is a matter of having something that is too loud of a decibel. I don't care if it's your speaker, your motorcycle, your ghetto blaster, or whatever. I mean, enjoy it for, you know, definitely. But like I mean, listen, when the flight path of the planes was coming right over the top of Old Town, guess what? Everybody was on board with that, because that was crazy noise pollution when they got that problem fixed. I mean, it took a little bit of work, but that flight path doesn't come over anymore, because guess what? It was noise pollution, right? Which brings me to the next point here. You know, talk to me about your plans to preserve and protect the small town feel, which is really a description of Seal Beach.
Well, I think you're going to know it as well as I do, that the most important thing we have to maintain is local control, local control, local control.
Yes.
So, I mean, the state has a one size fits all kind of, you know, like it's the czar, you know, saying everybody's got to build more housing. And so, you know, right now the plan is totally unreasonable that we zone, not build, but still zone for 1,243 new units of housing. And we're going to have to play ball on some level with the state, because other cities have tried, and they're bigger, richer cities like, you know, Newport Beach has tried, Yorba Linda has tried, and they go to, you know, Huntington Beach has tried. They're much bigger, wealthier cities, and they get beaten in court. And so we're going to have to find some way to play ball with the state. But there are things we can do to maintain that local control, so that at least we have a great measure of control over what gets built and what doesn't. And make sure that height restrictions are a part of the deal, and that, you know, and that anything that gets built is, you know, high quality housing that fits with the scheme and of the city and the particular neighborhoods it's going in. And that, yeah, all right, if we got to do some more density, yes, but like not high rise density, not density that isn't appropriate to Seal Beach. And I think, and we also need to push back, I think, with SCAG. And I've talked to Joe Kalmick about this, and you know, SCAG is the Southern California Association of Governments, and it's basically, you know, the mouthpiece that Southern California governments have to talk to the state about policies, state and the feds. And we need to say that in the case of Seal Beach in particular, the mandate is and the things they're pushing are unreasonable. Seal Beach is pretty much built out. I mean, 11% of our land is green space that you can't touch. Then we have naval weapons is almost 80% of the land mass is Seal Beach, and just about everything else is already built out. So, those, we have to make sure that we have a housing element that passes with the state. But at the same time, I think we need to start thinking about how we make sure that anything that gets built is high quality. One thing I would say that'll make developers a little less anxious to build, but it'll build the appropriate things is, if somebody's going to build market rate housing, great. That's good tax revenue. That's good for us. But it's got to be of the right scale, and a significant amount of it has to be set aside for moderate income housing, so that like teachers and firefighters that work here in Seal Beach can live here in Seal Beach and not communicate or commute, from, the Imperial Valley,
Right.
And that makes it a little less desirable for a developer to come rip in some new development. And it means if we have to build something, we're going to build something that's going to be useful to the state and useful to our community, and we have some measure of control over them. The same thing is true, by the way, and I keep speaking in these long chunks, but the city is working on a local coastal plan. And basically what that means is we would have a plan approved by the Coastal Commission that would allow us to make most land use decisions. So I know I talk to people all the time who
Game changer, by the way.
Yeah.
Game changer. And by the way, also not something that isn't being done in neighboring cities.
Entirely. And like the city has tried this before, and we've got a consultant now working on it. And I've talked to, the planning department, and it's supposed to be moving ahead. And really, realistically, we might have one before the Coastal Commission next year. I can just tell you that that's something I'm really focused on, because that's a priority for the city. It's going to save us a lot of money. It's going to save a lot of heartache. It's going to make things easier, and it's going to give us a greater measure of control over what happens here. And let me give you an example of how that works. I have a neighbor who is doing, had a plan approved for a major renovation in their home, and they got it through the Coastal Commission. They needed to make a small change to actually make the footprint of the home smaller than was originally passed. And they did the right thing. They said, look, I need to put in a modification. The Coastal Commission said, no, just turn in a new plan. I see no problem with this. It'll sail through. Well, they said when she spent $1,500 again to get the Coastal Commission's fee. So paid that fee twice. And when the second one they said was going to sail through, it sailed through, but they said, except you got to raise it up 14 inches. Right now, I talked to her, I put her in touch with Senator Umberg's office, and it took 3 months of her couch surfing with, her not being able to be in her home, but it eventually got worked out. Right. But that would have never happened if the decision was made in the city planning department with people who are beholden to and accountable to the people of Seal Beach. That's why we need a local coastal plan.
I mean, I want to keep talking about this, but I feel like I'll just talk it in circles because I'm so excited and it makes such perfect sense. And I've heard so many people, especially, doing what I do for a living. I mean, people that are coming down here to, I don't know, build a nicer home for their family. Or there was a gentleman we worked with a couple of years back. There was 4 lots for sale over on 17th Street with approved plans, not approved by the Coastal Commission, but that process can take years. I mean, it doesn't even make it viable. I mean, these people do this for a living. If you're a developer, I'm watching some of these homes get built around town. I'm like, that took 6 years. That took 5 years. That took 4. I mean, how does that make sense for people? Whereas, over here in Huntington Beach, they have that within the city. I mean, a lot of that and it really expedites the process. And as you said, you can maintain the control. I just don't see how that doesn't work out. I'm most excited for that one. So I was really excited to read that on your website. I was like, whoo, okay.
Man, are we working out?
Yeah. So moving on, can you share with me your environmental priorities?
Well, the first one we've already discussed at pretty good length, which is, preparing for sea level rise, storm damage, fire mitigation, especially in Gum Grove. But another one is water quality. And so, for instance, the AES plan is up the street here, and they do once through cooling. They were supposed to stop that years ago, but they keep getting extensions. I think one of the things the city needs to do is pressure our state lawmakers to say no more extensions, because I want to explain to people what happens at that plant. They suck water out of the San Gabriel River, run it through turbines, it's superheated, and then they put it right back into the river. So
Yeah.
some of the problem with that is it kills a lot of marine life, especially
Mhm.
like, the smaller marine life. But the bigger problem for us, well, as big a problem, is that water, and people, I know I'm a surfer, and I know anybody who surfs at Ray Bay knows that as soon as you paddle around the jetty, it's spooky that the water is 5 to 7 degrees warmer, literally in 3 strokes beyond the jetty, because it's all that superheated water coming down the river. And the problem for that is, it's a breeding ground for bacteria. The things that make surfers sick, that give you the ear infections, that cause you to get hepatitis, or the other things that the stomach bugs that we get from swimming in dirty water, are greatly exacerbated by thermic pollution, by that hot water. And so that's one thing I would really like to work with our partners in Long Beach and in the state government to really pressure that plant. The Hyperion plant, the Haynes plant, they got rid of once through cooling, and they've moved to air cooling, right? Let's find a way to end this sooner rather than later, like tomorrow, because that's just not, and the water quality is only going to get worse as water temperatures heat up over the next decade. So the last thing we need to be doing is adding to it in one of our most precious spots at River's End.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting. Well, there's so many different things that need to be addressed with that river, but yeah, I hadn't. The cooling is yeah, that's a lot of nasty stuff comes out of there.
I would also like to see the city take a more conservative approach on some of the gas station development. I mean, the state is mandating that we're going to all be electric by 2030 anyways, right? And yet, and we have several gas stations, but there's a plan to restore an old gas station at 5th and Marina, and to put in a mini mart there, which nobody really wants in the neighborhood. And the trouble with that is it's, that spot is already rife with contamination from the previous gas station that was there and leaking for 20 years. And the city was playing hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and sort of ignored the problem until it was so bad that people had to be evacuated from their homes in Bridgeport. And so, I mean, I think one thing we could do is say, is have a moratorium on planting new or building new gas stations. And instead, try and encourage that spot to be zoned for an electrical charging station, which makes more sense because it's right near where you have lots of the renters that live in Seal Beach and have less access and less ability to charge. That makes a lot of sense for them.
Yep. Yeah, there's been a lot of concern and talk about that. I mean, anybody who was involved with that, whether they were, residents of Bridgeport or had friends or family that lived in there, I still don't think that the larger population of residents in Seal Beach realized just how bad that was over there. I mean, it was bad, I mean,
we're looking at this expansion on 13th Street as well. I mean, now granted, that's not in District 3, but these are concerns.
Right. They are concerns. Let's pivot here for a moment and talk about your plans to address dining on Main Street. And I want to, add the caveat that Main Street is not in District 3, but, if you're elected to the council, these are things that are inevitably going to come to vote, right? So you will have an opinion, or you will have a vote on things that are going to apply to Main Street. So I want to talk a little bit about your plans to address the outdoor dining on Main Street and just kind of get some ideas where you're at on that.
Well, first of all, I think I'm always very deferential to Joe Kalmick, not only because it's been his district for so long, but because he ran a framing business on Main Street for over 30 years. And so I think my ideas for Main Street are really very much exactly what I've talked to Joe about. And I would say that the city council seems on the right track. I was at city council. I go to almost every city council meeting and have for the past year. And I've watched that come forward. And I think it was 2 meetings ago, about three or 4 weeks ago, the city council had a staff report on the parklets. It was just sort of a general staff report showing, what's going on now and what some other cities have done. And the guidance they got from council was pretty clear. They formed an ad hoc committee, which I know Mike Virapapa, who currently is mayor pro tem and represents the 3rd district, he volunteered to be on that committee. And the guidance was essentially common sense, that we found some good things about outdoor dining, and there are a lot of people who like eating al fresco. That's great. But at the same time, what we have now is not sustainable. It's not fair to retail businesses that have not only lost a lot of parking, but in many cases, the footprint of the parklets is much bigger than the frontage of the restaurant that's operating it. So in other words, they're blocking these retail stores who can't be seen from the street. And there are a number of other issues. We have to make sure that there's the design will allow them to be kept clean, and that we the city have code to educate and then, if necessary, enforce and give citations to parklet operators who don't keep it clean. And most do, and the other thing is there needs to be a reasonable fee paid by those that are operating the parklet. Nobody wants to hurt our restaurants, but they have the ability to eat inside, and that's the space they pay for. Well, if they're going to make money and do an economic activity in the public right of way, in the street, land that belongs to the city, and land that, or in spaces that other retailers would just as soon be parking, they're going to have to pay something reasonable for that use. They also need to have dining hours that are appropriate to, so that you're going to have dinner service in the evening, because sometimes you walk by and there's certain restaurants that you walk by at 7 o'clock and it's a sea of heat lamps and tables, and there's nothing going on. And that's like prime time for people when people need parking. So, I even suggested that I think one thing that would be helpful would be, that would be a win-win for everybody, is that if, for every parking space that a parklet takes up, the parklet operator would be paying for and have advertising that they were paying for one of the metered spaces to be free.
Got it.
I just think that's they get the advertising and the goodwill for having done it. And at the same time, that's going to help retailers who aren't operating parklets to have more free parking in downtown. And the city makes its revenue.
Okay. I haven't heard that one before. I like that. That's actually a very nice proposal. I think that it just in my conversations with my friends that run dining establishments on Main Street, I don't think one of them has had any type of a pushback on paying a fair share type of thing for this outdoor dining. And I think that, and these are people that have been on Main Street a long time, right? They are friends with the merchants to the left and to the right, and everybody's in this boat together. So I feel like the footprint, the time of use, and also whatever a reasonable fee, and I think also maybe some uniformity down there would be things that these restaurant owners would be interested in signing up for that. I feel like if I can just share a bit of feedback that I've got more recently, is this is probably about a month or 2 months ago. My good friend Lisa, she manages all the taco serves. She happens to also own the one on Main Street. And this was about mid-September, and I was in there having lunch, and I said, "How's it going?" And she goes, "Well, it's going good. We're just concerned as we get into the slower time of the year, as following Labor Day, if business really slows down. However, our outdoor dining has been doing really good." And she said, "My concern about that is, number one, it's a good space for us. People enjoy sitting outside, but we have literally the last communication we got from the city was that this outdoor dining was, the parklet was going away as of, I think it was like September 29th. Don't quote me on the date, but so she's like, but I don't know what's going to happen on September 29th because I haven't gotten any return calls or feedback. The last thing I have is this paper saying this is going away. And I mean, as a small business owner, like those types of things, you will lose sleep over that. And it just makes you sick to your stomach, not knowing what's coming next. So, I mean, just some better communication on how that's all going to play out, I think would be greatly appreciated by the merchants on Main Street. So, I'm sorry.
By the way, I think your point's really well taken about, there's a lot of goodwill between the retail businesses and the restaurants. So for instance, I know for a fact that, a lot of the retail businesses really helped the restaurants when COVID restrictions were at their height. They helped them expand those businesses because they understood otherwise they were going to lose the restaurants. And it's an ecosystem. Like, that downtown is amazing. We all love it. And I walk there and it's so nice to be able to walk to your downtown. I'm taking my ex-wife to celebrate her birthday with my daughter to Waltz on Saturday. And it's enormous to all of us. It's a great asset and it brings in $5 million a year in sales tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think your point is well taken as well about better communication. And that's something I know Michael McGroarty, who's running in Leisure World for the 5th District, has talked a good deal about that. Leisure World feels that the communication isn't as good as it could be. So yeah, I think that's an area maybe we could improve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the little things make the biggest improvements. Well, I have a couple questions from our audience. We've got a pretty big audience on tonight. And I've got a question here from, first, this is coming from Naomi Way. You might know Naomi.
I do.
She is a friend of ours. And she says, what does Stephanie suggest to address our homeless population issue?
So, I mean, nobody in the state of California and probably in the United States can run for office without thinking about that. And I know that I spend an inordinate amount of my time, both when I worked for Congressman Cisneros and now when I work for Supervisor Foley, dealing with homeless issues, not just homeless veterans issues, but homelessness writ large. I think one of the most important things we need to do is make sure that we bring in, again, some outside resources. And I've been checking on what things are available. There's something called the outreach and engagement teams run by the county. And I've used those in several spots. And one of the things I recently learned from talking to the deputy director of homelessness and behavioral health in Huntington Beach,
Mm-hmm.
that Huntington Beach is getting outreach and engagement teams paid for by the county, and they come twice a week. Well, let's see if we can't request the same thing of the county. And I'll tell you why that's really beneficial, because we have great homeless liaison officers that work with the city, but they can only do so much. And the character of their conversation with somebody who's homeless, who's probably, most of whom have substance abuse, mental health, untreated mental health issues, and often both, they've had run-ins with the law and they're defensive when they deal with a law enforcement officer. No matter how friendly and well-intentioned the officer is, that conversation goes differently than an outreach and engagement team. What the county offers is a team of 2 social workers, MSWs, who many of them have been homeless themselves or are recovering addicts or alcoholics. And so these are people who built their lives on and have real authority when they speak to folks, and they come dressed in a blue polo shirt.
Oh, wow.
Not a gun belt. And here's how that can be effective. If we look at the folks that we see regularly, say the people on First Street who are camping in trailers and camper vans, who don't think that they're homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Getting them off the street is tough. What the homeless liaison officer would say is, hey, why don't you go into shelter? And what that means is what we can offer people is a place called Bridges in Anaheim that's a congregate shelter. Everybody who's had a brush with homelessness knows what congregate shelter is, and nobody wants to move into it. It sounds, and it's not that they're being just snooty. Do you want to live in a dorm room with, between 6 and 20 other people, most of whom have substance abuse and mental health issues and they're total strangers to you? Do you want to do that? And so here's the difference. What the outreach and engagement teams can do and what a social worker can do is they can have a meaningful conversation with that person, get to know them, probably come back a few times and start talking to them about a housing plan. So they can say, look, I know you're really resistant to going to Bridges, but I can assure you, and if you're willing to do that in 6 months, especially based on your disability claim, I think we can get you into permanent supportive housing, but you're going to have to accept some services. That's the kind of thing we need to be doing. Or in some cases, they're buying people a bus ticket to go back to, live with their mom, where, in another town that's less expensive than living in coastal California, and where their disability check. I mean, most of these people have some form of income.
Yeah.
Just not enough to house them. So those are the things that I think we really need to be creative about. And Huntington Beach has done that. And in the last 2 years, they've reduced their homelessness population by 35%. That's enormous in 2 years.
Yeah. That's it. I haven't heard that before either. So I'm hoping that the attendees tonight are like going, okay, like these sounds like some, yeah.
And I want our cops to be able to focus on, the people who are breaking into cars and stealing catalytic converters.
Right.
And I'm sure that that's mostly why most of them became police officers, to catch bad guys, right? Let's use the right tool for the right job, and let's find resources to do it.
Yeah, they were literally outside of our office yesterday. Just yesterday, again, there was somebody really having a breakdown out here. They were ripping plants out of the ground. I want to get into what everything else that was going on, but it takes it takes a resource from the police department to come over here and address that. Excuse me. This is in the middle. This is in the middle of the day. Everybody can see it. That's you've got the hotel, the businesses here. I mean, it was like, oh man, I feel bad for these people, but it's always the resource from the police department that to come over and take care of it as it's currently set up. But I like what you're saying, looking for those resources, because I guess it makes perfect sense. I just never thought of it. When somebody is approaching them who doesn't look like a police officer, you're definitely having a different conversation. Your guard is not up. You're, and
somebody
and
who
your
does
ears
that,
are open.
that's their whole mission, and they're doing that day in, day out. They're gonna have a better rapport.
Yeah.
But, and I'll tell you the other thing. Definitely need law enforcement. I saw the police recently serve a warrant for somebody who'd stolen an e-bike, and this was somebody who was being evicted from their apartment, and they'd stolen an e-bike, and the cops were amazing. Our PD, they used a drone. They did everything possible to make sure that this situation didn't escalate. And here's the thing, though, that's somebody who'd been arrested a month prior, and it's somebody who'd started out in middle class, somebody who'd worked in the trades and then got in trouble with drugs, stopped paying their rent, was already in the process of eviction, and was stealing to feed their habit, and because they didn't have employment. And here's the thing, he had gotten arrested a month before this more serious incident. Was there any intervention or opportunity to get that person into treatment, and I think, again, that's where outreach and engagement people working closely with the police can maybe stop some of these problems before that. They wound up bringing him out on a stretcher, and we had 4 cars here, including 2 supervisors. It cost us probably thousands of dollars in OCFA and, in police response. Let's see if we can nip some of those problems in the bud.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the sound of that. I wanted to, before we're almost to the top of the hour, we do have another question here, and then I want to give you a chance to do closing thoughts. Chad Wells says, hi, Chad Wells from Seal Beach Board Riders Club. He wants to ask, have you addressed the lack of surf in Seal Beach? And if you don't, do you want me to give you context on that one?
I think I know a little bit about it. In fact, I've been trying to get in touch with the Board Riders Club myself, because I've talked to the Surf Rider Foundations Mandy Sackett and I have talked a couple of times about it. And I will tell you, I've been surfing here for 6 years, and I always surf at Ray Bay because it's really the only place that has consistent surf.
Yep.
And I know the board riders are pretty concerned that it's actually the creation of the sand dunes or the sand berms, the temporary sand berms in the winter, but also the way they're just sort of pushed to the edge of the shore. And that may be what's causing, we used to have great surf in Seal Beach along the coast, all the way from Ray Bay all the way down past the pier. And that doesn't happen anymore, not consistently. And I don't really know the answer. I know that Surfrider is working with an expert at UCI to try and do a study. It's an interesting fact that while our beach and Surfside is shrinking and it needs sand replenishment, our beach in Old Town all the way up through River's End is growing. And it's one of the only beaches in California that's growing. And it can't be sand coming out of the river because we've been in drought for so long. So clearly something is happening that our beach is growing and we're not forming sandbars. And so, yeah, I think we need to get to the bottom of that because, my good friend, and we went to school together, but the CEO of the Surfrider Foundation did a major study on the economic impact of surfing, and it's substantial. I mean, we've got three surf shops in town, and then there are all the people that are going to eat after they surf. And then there are all the people who want to buy homes here because they surf. So even if you don't surf, we have some interest in making sure we understand what's going on our beaches.
I want to Chad is he's given me some more info here in the Q&A. So I didn't introduce you correctly, Chad. Chad is the president of, sorry, I've got too many different questions going on here, of the Seal Beach Board Riders. So you definitely want to connect with Chad because Chad and I have had conversations about this. He was at my new business launch event last Friday night, and we were talking, and Joe was here, Joe Kalmick was here, Chris DeSanto was here. So I know they all had a bit of a chat about it, but especially being, you being a surfer, it's interesting. You come into the picture but as there really is no consistent surf there. Chad dropped some interesting facts in the chat here. He says, Seal Beach has grown at 2 million a year. I'm guessing, I'm not exactly sure what the
cubic yards or.
Yes, a year since the 30s per the data from the Surfrider/UCI. He says, we are the only surf club who cannot train at their own beach.
Yeah, that I knew.
Sadly, municipal parking, local vendors, local surf shops, and all the effects of a lack of surf in town are paying the price. Everyone is headed south. So it's kind of this cumulative effect.
In the winter, like there's no surf even at Ray Bay, and I'm in Huntington Beach. I don't want to live there, but they have better, more consistent surf. I'll give my Google Voice number because I know you want to wrap up some of the questions, but I'd also really love to talk to Chad. I think, this is something that I think anybody who's running for council is probably interested in. But I hope we can talk. And so it's 213-319. 8938. And can I pop it in the chat here as well?
Yeah, if you would pop that in the chat, that'd be great. So Chad definitely, and he says the only club in the country of over 50 clubs. So I would love for you guys to be able to connect, because he said, when I saw him Friday night, he said, hey, I know you're going to be talking to Stephanie on Tuesday evening. Can you please ask her about this topic, which is, it's just, he's, essentially the voice of the club for our city. And he's done a lot of research. They have aerial photos, a lot of researches they've poured over it, but they're having trouble getting attention on that particular topic. So you being a surfer, Chad being the president, I think that would be a good combo. Yeah. Okay. So the number's there in the chat, guys. So Stephanie, just being mindful of our time, closing thoughts, anything else you'd like your constituents to know about you? Well,
I mean, I hope one of the things I can bring, I joked about being a government dork, but I hope one of the things I can bring is a little bit of energy. I think we got a great city. I think we have a great council. I plan to be here like until I pry it from my cold dead fingers. It took me a long time to get here, and I'm like that the Soviet refusenik or a defector who reminds you how much you love America because I love it so much, right? And I hope I can just bring that to the council. Whether or not I win election, I want to serve the city, and I think I have a lot of knowledge about local Orange County government, and from working with the feds all the way down to working with a lot of other cities. And I'd just like to, be useful to the city that way. And I hope I can.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I think that, let's see if please call or text me, Chad. I don't know that he's seeing that. So I'm going to type the answer to his question. I just copied and pasted the,
oh, it was I sent it to host and panelists, not everyone. I don't think I had the privileges to write to everyone.
Let me see here. Let me see if I can put that over there. Chad, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It's not allowing me to copy and paste. So I'm going to read the number one more time, guys. So to get in touch with Stephanie, it's area code 213-319-8938. 213-319-8938. All right, you guys.
Please reach out if there's something I can answer for you or something you'd like me to know. I'd really like to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
There's one other thing. Tomorrow night, there's a candidate forum put on by the chamber, and the District 3 portion will begin at 6:15. So I hope folks will come out to that, and you can get the measure of all three of us in the D3 race, and it's some great democracy.
So tomorrow night, the District 3 portion is at 6:15. What is the location, or is that an online thing?
How about that, right? Yeah, it's at the senior center adjacent to the library on Electric.
Okay. Well, you guys heard it here. I'm glad everybody, I've got a lot of great comments here. Thanks, appreciate it. So guys, it was my pleasure. Stephanie, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we're excited to hear more from you leading up to election.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Nat. This has been fun.
Awesome. All right. See you around town. Bye.